Welcome to another episode of The Learning Corner with Scott and Stacie.
I'm Scott.
And I'm Stacie. And today we're going to talk a little bit about time versus money. This is something that we have quite a bit of conversation about, and about trying to stay balanced. So let's talk about it a little bit. So, why do you think that that's important that you understand the difference between time and money?
Well, for me, I've always been really cognizant of the fact that over the lifespan of a small business, you have two different resources. You typically have time and money that are available to you. And over the life cycle of the business, you have those in different degrees.
Okay.
So when I first started my business, I had lots of time on my hands and I had absolutely no money. And so I kind of at that point started envisioning the scales of justice, if you will, and I started thinking about it, and it seemed to me that you either have time or you have money. And so in those days I had a lot of time, but no money up here. And so what I could do is I could start trading my time for money. So when I started a small roofing company in college, and the first summer, I pounded every nail that got driven. I carried every bundle of shingles up the ladder. I picked up every piece of trash on the ground because I couldn't afford to pay anybody to do any of that. And when the job got done, I took all of the money and paid off all of the materials that I had purchased, and then I had leftover money. Now I had some money, still had a lot of time on my hands. So the next job, I did the same thing and started gradually accumulate a little more money, but I was giving up my time. So I had less free time available and started having more money.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
The analogy of the scale, I don't think is a perfect analogy, because the ultimate goal for everybody, I presume, is as your business matures and you get into the twilight years of your business, we both want to have money in the bank. And we want to have time available to us as well.
Right.
But in those early days, boy, it sure seems important to me to be willing to trade that time in order to accumulate the money.
So how much time do you think that you need to be able to accumulate? Because are you talking about 40 hours a week, or are you talking about, because a lot of folks that are watching this are young entrepreneurs that are just starting out, they're bootstrapping, their business, and so give me an idea of the time element you're talking about.
Okay. Well, there's a couple of different scenarios that could play out there. It could be somebody who has a full-time job and is doing a business part-time on the side.
Yep. And we've had one on there about when your side hustle needs to become your full-time job.
Exactly.
That's another episode.
So in that, I think that you've got to be looking, if you're going to get a small business up off the ground, I think that you've got to be looking on average probably at 60 hours a week, between the 40 that you're giving somebody else and the 20 that you're putting into yourself. The more hours that you're able to put into your side hustle, into your own thing, the sooner your side hustle can become the main thing. I had lots of 80-hour weeks in the early days, and I would hate life if I was putting in 80-hour weeks now, as you know. So over time, you get to transition away from those super high number of hours.
So what's one of the things when you have young entrepreneurs that you have several that come to you for advice,
Right.
and I know you meet at breakfast or take them to lunch. A lot of them, I've heard them ask the question, they don't have a lot of money. They're still trying to figure it out. And so there's not a lot of money in the bank, and they're trying to grow. What advice do you give them with regard to this whole time versus money thing?
That you've got to sacrifice the time, and if you're not willing to sacrifice the time, I know there are people who the time is more valuable than the money, okay?
And that's okay.
There's nothing wrong with that, no. But if you are that person, then you need to go find a really good job working for somebody else, where at 5 o'clock when the whistle, the old Fred Flintstone whistle, when the whistle blows, you slide down the tail and you're out and into the car and you go home and you don't have to think about that anymore.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely no shame in that. Most of America works for somebody else, and when the day ends, they can go home and spend time with their family and do the things that they want to do. No shame in that whatsoever.
Yeah.
However, if you are the entrepreneurial sort and it is super important for you to get this business off the ground and this business to become a big part of your life moving forward, then you've got to be willing to put in the hours in order to get to the point where you can cut back on the hours and start spending the money. So
yeah, I think that's, from the entrepreneurs that we visit with, I think that's one of the misconceptions that maybe they had going into the business was that I go into the business for myself so I can take off anytime I want.
yeah.
And I go into business for myself so that I only have to work 3 days a week.
Right. I know plenty of people that are in that boat, and they get enough customers that they can squeak by, but they squeak by for
Forever.
years and years and forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. At some point, the only thing that gets you over that hump is to put in the hours, and we've also talked about when you hire your first person, okay?
Right.
Well, and again, time was a critical part of that conversation.
Well, and that's trading the money you've earned for some of your time back because you're having somebody else do that work.
Yes. So like if let's say I hire an bookkeeper, okay?
Yep.
Well, before I hire the bookkeeper, I'm spending an hour a day working on my books and working on my numbers, right? Eventually I get to the point where I don't have that hour a day and I need to get that back. Well, then I need to hire somebody who can be my bookkeeper.
Yep.
And it might be that person is a subcontractor. Or it might be that you end up, I wouldn't recommend that somebody early on hire a full-time bookkeeper, but it might be a part-time person, it might be a bookkeeper or a subcontractor, a firm that you hire to do that. But when you do that, now you're giving them, might be $50 an hour to do that, but what you've done is just purchased an hour back of time into your week.
Yeah, very good. So, when does that change over the life cycle of a business? Because, like you said, the scales are kind of, because it's not like you want balanced where they're exactly equal. Because eventually, what you want is you want both.
Right.
And so when did that change for you?
I would say it probably changed for me about 3 years in. And I was able to start feeling like I was buying back some of my personal time. I really, as you know, my perfect world, I'd get up early in the morning and go to a coffee shop or someplace to have breakfast. And I would have my breakfast, but I would sit and read the paper for an hour.
Yep.
And I would flip through internet things, looking at different articles that are interesting. And I would hit the office at 10 o'clock.
Yep.
In a perfect world for me, and I'd probably leave at 2 o'clock in a perfect world. And I'm not anywhere close to that, but finally got to the point where I felt like I could go and read the paper and have a cup of coffee. About 3 years in, started feeling like the time burden was lessening.
So at that point, had you hired people to replace some of the duties that you were taking care of?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the temptation, when you hire that first person, the temptation is to go,
Ooh.
I can just, what are they, management by abdication?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Maybe that needs to be a topic sometime.
That probably should be a topic sometime. So, but no, what you have to realize is that person that is now doing, let's say, the books, okay, you don't get to just totally abdicate everything about the books. You don't just get to look at a P&L once a month. You still have to manage. You're still the payroll manager. You're still the accounting manager.
Yep.
And so you still have to manage that person who's doing that. So I didn't buy, when I first hired somebody in, I didn't buy all of that time. I bought 80% of that time back. So.
Yeah, very interesting. So which one is more important, time or money?
Well, that's an individual choice for most people, but where I come in on that is that for the most part, I can trade my time for more money, but when I get down to the tail end of my life, all the money in the world
Won't buy you more time.
won't buy me another day with my wife.
Yeah. No.
So,
Yeah.
So you need to be conscious of that as you're going through, and there are people who will, well, I know one person who worked 20-hour days just because you love it. It's not because you're after the almighty dollar, but for you, it's a passion, is that work. And for me, the free time is more of the passion than the actual work itself is.
Yeah.
So between the two of us, we strike a pretty good balance.
Yeah. But I think that the core message of this topic really is that it's what you want out of your business. And so, but you've got to be willing at some point in the business cycle to sacrifice your time in order to grow it. you don't get to where we're at now overnight.
Right.
And so, this was years of late nights, super early mornings, 10, 12-hour days.
And more sometimes.
And more sometimes.
Yeah.
And
I've installed crown molding in somebody's house at midnight the morning before Thanksgiving because I promised them it would be done in time for their Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
I've loaded trash picked up trash out of somebody's yard on Christmas morning because their family was coming at noon and just had to get done.
Yeah. And so you've got to be, as an entrepreneur, you got to be willing to put in those hours for it to work. And again, if it's that's not you, that's okay. But it's not for the faint of heart.
No,
that's for sure.
certainly not.
No, certainly not.
And I'm a big advocate of being the guy swinging the hammer when, that's where my business started, was swinging the hammer and doing the labor.
Up to a certain point.
Yes, up to a certain point. Well, in those early days.
Yep.
But one of the things that I had to learn was, we've talked before about working both in your business and on your business. And really want to emphasize that when you're swinging the hammer, you're the guy working in the business.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. And you might have to spend 12 hours at somebody's house, 12 hours every day in order to get a project to completion.
Yes.
While that's going on, I can't emphasize enough how important it is for you to continue to dedicate some time to continuing to work on the business.
Right.
How are you going to make sure that 30 years from now, you're not swinging a hammer 12 hours a day?
Yep. Yep. And that actually, we've got another episode where we talk a little bit about the guy who does it cheaper, and so it gets to that it answers the question about 30 years from now, are you still going to be in business?
Right.
And so that's all part of it, is having that time to work on your business. So so with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap this episode up.
All right.
And until the next one. So we appreciate you joining us for the Learning Corner with Scott and Stacie. If you like what you're hearing here, or if you want to drop us a line for a topic maybe you want to hear us talk about, feel free to do so. Or tag someone that might need to hear this message, or share it on your Facebook page. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.